Bien, merci, Sean. Jennie Carignan, bienvenue. C'est excellent de vous avoir de retour sur notre scène. Ce n'est pas votre première fois avec nous, mais c'est la première fois qu'on vous a dans votre poste comme chef d'état-major de la Défense. On est très fiers de vous et on est très conscients avec toutes les attentes que vous avez sur votre cédule, de donner du temps avec nous autres. C'est grandement apprécié. You missed a great day today so far, but hopefully it's going to finish off on a really high note with you here. General, you've been in the job now for 8 months, more or less, and when we kind of contemplate really what has been going on in that last 8 months, for all of us who have worn the uniform, I think we have a pretty good appreciation for how much of a challenge that is. And of course, you have friends and family that probably don't know very much about really what the CDS does on a day-to-day basis. And I'm wondering if you might start us off by giving us the 8-month CDS elevator pitch of what you're thinking about the situation that Canada faces today in your unique role as our Chief of the Defence Staff. General.
Merci Guy et merci pour l'invitation cet après-midi. En fait, merci aussi à CDAI pour organiser ces événements-là. C'est tout à fait requis pour justement mieux informer les Canadiens sur le travail qu'on fait à la défense et dans le domaine de la sécurité. Donc, d'avoir l'occasion d'interagir avec une audience qui est bien informée, c'est certain que ça nous aide beaucoup dans notre travail parce que relever le niveau de connaissance au niveau de la défense pour les Canadiens, c'est un des endroits où on doit faire mieux. Parce que, bon, je commence mon elevator pitch. Quand on regarde à la défense du Canada au cours des 30 dernières années plus, c'est certain qu'on se fiait beaucoup sur notre géographie et notre position géostratégique pour nous protéger. We have an Arctic that was very protective in terms of very austere environment, but also, big oceans on either side, and again, a threat that was less to our continent. Times have changed, technology has changed. We are now in a situation where our adversaries have a way to reach our continent with new technologies and new ways of mechanism to deliver various missiles and so on. So in terms of reach now, our continent is also more vulnerable from the Arctic perspective with the climate change. So with an Arctic that is more accessible, more traffic, then we have a completely different picture in terms of how accessible and vulnerable we are from a continental defense perspective. Added to that, a geopolitical context that is what I use is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Which again to me describes the type of context and situation we evolve in. We now have adversaries who are working together, exchanging technologies. We're thinking Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. So aligning their efforts together, which again is a new development in assessing the threat that we are facing. So if I, again, consolidating that very quickly, this is where the time has come now to have a better understanding of what needs to be done for defense. And if I could qualify with 2 words, the approach and the state that we are in currently is 1, transformation, and secondly, mobilization. At the same time as doing the business of defense on a daily basis as well. So on a transformation aspect, we have been equipped and we have been supported to a very different mission over the past 30 years than what we will be asked to do in the future, which looks like more like large-scale military operations. So you need a different type of equipment, you need to be structured differently, and you need to organize yourself differently to prosecute these type of conflicts versus, more limited objectives in the past 35, 40 years post-Cold War scenario. So that's the transformation piece. And the mobilization piece, we know that we're going to need more people to do that. We know that we've had lots of challenges in recruiting new Canadians, young Canadians to join the CAF, but also it's mobilizing our reserve force, it's mobilizing Canadians towards contributing to their defense. So that's the second piece to the state of affairs that we are currently involved in.
The theme of this conference for the next few days is from policy to action. And of course, in our military culture, we're action-oriented people. We want results. We want to be able to kind of get on with the job that we're being asked to do. We've got a lot of work that's still to be done on strong, secure, engaged, let alone the Indo-Pacific strategy, let alone the Arctic strategy, and let alone everything that's been articulated in Our North Strong and Free. And when you look at the analysis, but if you look more specifically at the to-do list of things that we need to do, I'm just wondering a little bit about the idea of what I think we are accustomed to, at least in the uniform side, of unity of thought, purpose, and action. And from your perspective as the Chief of Defense Staff, do you have that kind of unity of thought, purpose, and action in terms of the no-kidding Chief of Defense Staff priorities right now for the CAF leadership that's here, as well as with the defense team leadership that you're working with? Just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that.
So first of all, our new defense policy, along with strong, secure, engage, is very, very informative in terms of ensuring that we are addressing the right priorities and nested that within overall strategic objectives. So this is very useful to me and to us as a defense team in terms of orienting our work. So it is very clear that we have priorities that are focused internally within CAF and the defense team, but also globally as to where we want to invest more time and effort. So internally, it is very clear that our priority is recruiting, but also attached to that is retention, because you need to have both in order to be successful in growing the CAF to the level that it needs to grow, both in terms of getting back up to strength, but also onboarding new people with new qualifications and new skill sets. So this is why recruiting is absolutely key to being successful. Unless we get that right, like nothing else will be possible. So we have gathered the whole defense team around the table, and this is why we are starting to see some success. But before I declare victory, I want to see more of how this is going to be ongoing, and then we'll keep adapting as time goes, and then monitor the effects of the changes that we have inserted. And from an external to CAF policy level priority, it is very clear that continental defense, defense of Canada, and defense of the Arctic are the key piece. If we do this well, then everything else is possible, of course. But our commitments to NATO and the European theater, and of course, our contribution to the Indo-Pacific is key to this success. So what comes first is definitely defense of Canada, but then also addressing the other priorities within the policy.
In fact, maybe you just came back from the Arctic. I understand that over the last few days you started in Yellowknife and you hit Inuvik and a number of other places in between Tuktoyaktuk. And in fact, I was having a conversation with our ambassador from Latvia over lunch. We were talking a little bit about this focus on Canada's far north and the Arctic relative to other priorities. And so, if you kind of look at, of course, the context of what would be involved to address all of the security issues in Canada's far north, we would recognize it as being an exceptionally expensive proposition. And how do we square, I guess, the ambition that we still have for, the partnership with NORAD, taking care of the Arctic, fulfilling our commitments with our NATO allies, obviously plussing up what we're doing in Latvia, wanting to be relevant in the Indo-Pacific. It seems like we still want to do it all. And do we have that choice to do it all in this kind of world that we are in right now?
I think it's about sequencing and prioritizing our efforts. So we do have the capacity to invest in those various areas, and we are making our current strength work towards that aspect. So, the NORAD, continental and Arctic defense have a different problem set than Europe and the Indo-Pacific. So we use our current capabilities and expertise and skills to address those different theaters with different assets. So, and then again, it is being noticed, especially in the Indo-Pacific, where we have a more constant presence via ships, our ships who are constantly deployed, but also via various defense engagements with other skills. So, for example, disaster assistance relief, which is very important for many of the Indo-Pacific nations, and so on and so forth. So, again, those engagements are speaking to our seriousness about being involved in the Indo-Pacific, and it is actually noticed. And then same with our commitment to NATO. So we're not, we are very mindful of consolidating as well how we are deployed in Europe. So we are currently conducting an analysis as to how we can consolidate better and gain some efficiencies on how we do things in Europe. We have grown organically since the past 10 years. So now we can probably generate additional capacities by reorganizing, restructuring, and ensuring that we do things in a more efficient manner.
And maybe we can just carry on with the Arctic theme for just a moment. One of our earlier panels, we had the commander of NORAD, and we were talking a little bit about the Arctic and really the fact that right now 7 of the 8 Arctic nations are NATO nations. And so if we look at our contribution to NATO on an evolutionary perspective, as the western flank and the northern flank, do you see kind of cooperation with those Arctic NATO nations as perhaps an area for Canada to take a greater leadership role?
There is an opportunity to do that, and especially in terms of intelligence, as our Arctic is very different from our other partners in NATO. So it's a different model that needs to be envisioned as we share information about the Arctic, and especially in terms of intelligence. So definitely lots of opportunities there to take a leadership role with our 6 other NATO partners in the Arctic space. But this work is currently ongoing. We have restarted the Arctic Chud forum over the last year or so, and then gaining more momentum as time goes as well.
Coming back to the people problem for a moment, last year the minister was on the stage, and it's where he talked a little bit about in fact you were on the stage, I think after him, talking about the culture, people, attraction, recruiting problem, and the comment he made, of course, at that point was kind of the Canadian Forces being in a death spiral if we don't fix this issue with people. And Minister Collinette, who's somewhere in the room here. In fact, there's Minister Collinette. He was with us at the end of the day yesterday, and he was reflecting a little bit on the role of the reserves in our future kind of planning for the Canadian Forces, and whether we're being creative enough, and whether we're thinking a little bit about the supplemental reserve, maybe re-enrollment of people who have been there before. It seems that there hasn't been a lot said about the reserve really in R&R Strong and Free. Not a lot has been said really, I think, about the role of the reserve. So I'm just wondering, so where are we in terms of thinking about how to really leverage the reserve for some of the people problems? And another kind of thought, of course, given the footprint across the country, is the idea of mobilization and mobilizing society towards really dealing with the people problems that you have in the Canadian Forces with your missions and mission sets, but more broadly speaking as well, a whole of society approach to dealing with the really challenging problems that we're confronted with technology. We've just had a panel on AI, and we talked about procurement, defense industrial strategy. So I really just want to get a little bit of your thoughts on mobilization, the reserves, and how we get everybody involved in this work.
Yes, the reserve play a huge role in the mobilization piece that we are engaged, and again, a lot more opportunities to explore on the reserve side that we have not tapped into so far. But just as we speak, there's a huge involvement of reserves. For example, in Latvia, in some cases, they consist of 40% of the forces deployed in Latvia. Just coming back from up Nanook, the reserve is 50% of the troops deployed up in the Arctic as part of that operation. So it's we're going to be leveraging the reserve even more as we go. And then part of the transformation piece is how do we modify our approach to reserve, how we admin to create more responsive mechanism by which there's flexibility in our system to leverage again the reserve's contribution.
Peut-être on pourrait changer un peu le focus. Compte tenu de l'évolution de notre situation géostratégique, quelles sont les menaces, les principales menaces qui pèsent sur le Canada qui vous préoccupent et auxquelles les Canadiens devraient réfléchir un peu? So I'm really thinking about the military threats that you're thinking about. We had one of our first opening panels. We had the director of CSIS, the chief of CSE. We had the National Security Intelligence Advisor. So we got the bigger threat piece. But I'm thinking in the military domain, what are you really concerned about?
Oui, même si je me concentre sur le domaine militaire, c'est clair que la menace est multidimensionnelle. Donc, il faut être bien connaissant du contexte. Donc, par exemple, des changements climatiques vont avoir un impact sur les opérations qu'on fait, les opérations nationales qu'on fait. Il faut être bien préparé pour ça et avoir les forces nécessaires pour être capable de répondre adéquatement. Il y a les aspects qui sont typiquement militaires, comme j'en ai parlé un peu plus tôt. C'est certain qu'on a des adversaires qui maintenant collaborent ensemble. Quand on parle des gros joueurs, la Chine, la Russie, la Corée du Nord, l'Iran. Donc, le fait qu'ils travaillent ensemble apporte une autre dimension à la menace militaire à laquelle on fait face. Le développement dans les missiles maintenant qui peuvent atteindre le continent et les méthodes de delivery, comme on dit en bon français, qui peuvent s'approcher du continent où on est maintenant très vulnérable à cette menace-là. Et la menace de désinformation aussi. Ça a un impact direct sur comment on s'organise, nous les Canadiens, pour faire face à ça, parce que ça peut apporter beaucoup de de chaos à l'intérieur de notre société. Donc, la résilience de nos communautés est extrêmement importante. On note aussi dans l'article, il faut être très vigilant parce que les Chinois viennent offrir des bons deals. On a des communautés qui sont vulnérables aussi dans le Grand Nord. Donc, non, ce n'est pas une menace militaire directe, mais ça affecte l'état de nos communautés. Et encore une fois, on a des gens qui viennent s'insérer dans nos communautés. C'est aussi problématique. Donc, vraiment, c'est multidimensionnel. Il faut être bien conscient de tout ça, en même temps qu'on fait l'évaluation de la menace militaire pure en même temps.
Je pense que pour ceux qui sont conscients des responsabilités de chef d'état-major de la défense, peut-être ils savent pas vraiment l'ampleur de tout ce qui est exigé avec notre chef d'état-major de la défense. The role, of course, is you're the commander of the Canadian Armed Forces. You're a policy advisor to the government, to the minister, to the prime minister, and you're a military diplomat. The connections that you have in Canada's alliances with our international partners puts you in kind of a privileged position to be using those channels to assess the international situation and to bring back those perspectives back to the government of Canada. And we've heard a lot, and probably there's folks in this room that would share this view, is that Canada has lost a lot of ground with our international partners, that perhaps we're not seen as being as reliable a partner, not sharing the burden that we should. And I'm just wondering what your take is based on, I know that at the beginning of your job you spent quite a bit of time traveling around in different meetings with the chiefs of defense. So I'm just wondering if you can give us your assessment of the state of our international relations with our key partners.
So I've spent a considerable amount of time, especially in the first few months of my mandate, to establish the network, to make sure that I wasn't phoning somebody in the middle of a crisis. So it's always good practice to establish solid relationships prior to anything going wrong. And I have to say, amongst all the various forums that I participate, or whether it's in a bilateral relationship, there's a lot of demand for more Canadians on, various in various levels of effort in terms of military contribution. And from my perspective, a lot of respect for what Canadians bring to the table, a lot of respects for our soldiers, our work ethics, our reliability. When we say something, we actually do it as promised, and there is a lot of respect for that aspect. If this is something that we cannot do, we immediately say no. So then there's clarity behind what we offer or not. So again, my impression right now is that there is a lot of respect for who we are and what we are about and what we do.
So we're not being shut out of any clubs. There was some speculation of being booted out of the Five Eyes.
No.
You haven't received the rejection card yet?
No, and in fact, I'm getting invited to too many meetings right now. So that's what I have to manage carefully.
I was telling General Lawson that when I was his Vice Chief of Defense Staff, he couldn't be here at the Ottawa Conference one year, and he was in some place like Hawaii, and I was reflecting a little bit on the fact that the chief gets to go off and be in all these exciting places and leaves poor Steve Kelsey wherever he is. He's probably not even here. He's probably in NDHQ, back at NDHQ in some boardroom. So that's just the role of the Vice Chief and the Chief. This one question I hadn't necessarily thought maybe to ask you, but one of the questions from the crowd kind of prompts me to do so. Vous étiez le commandant du Collège militaire royal de Saint-Jean. We had the Arbour report recently talking about the role of the military colleges. We just had the RMC Club Association of Alumni put together, I think, a very compelling kind of a piece on the importance of the military colleges for our fundamental leadership, for the profession of arms. The question here was, what's your view of instituting the ROTP program across universities and colleges in Canada? I mean, we have a regular officer training program already in the civilian universities, but maybe where are you, as a former commandant, but as the Chief of Defence Staff, on the role of our military colleges as a foundation of our leadership and setting the tone really for the culture of the Canadian Forces?
Mm-hmm. So I have to say that the military colleges are one way to bring officers in to our culture. But there are many other ways, which is in fact hugely important and enabling having a broad range of menu of how to bring officers into our system. And RMC is one pillar of that, but we also have various ways by which we bring officers in the officer corps. So lots of respect for the different methods and mechanisms that we have to do that. But for RMC in particular, there's a huge role for RMC to play, yes, for officer cadets, and then of course bring them in as young officers, but there's also a lot of academia that goes within the military college space to formulate or enable or contribute to the thoughts on security and defense, which is what military colleges also bring from their academic expertise in that sense. But no doubts to me that the various means and methods that we have currently to bring officers and qualify officers, of which RMC plays also a very important role.
Second question that's come from the audience, and I'm going to change it slightly to what's been asked, and I want to talk a little bit about the reshaping, perhaps, of the defense team. If you look at uniformed members of the Canadian Armed Forces that are doing jobs that could be done by others, either it could be done by professional public servants, could be done by contractors, and to put those uniforms in positions which are really the raison d'etre of being in uniforms, and the partnership perhaps with other sectors as well to help with some of the heavy lifting with the work that you have to do, whether it be in the scientific community, whether it be in defense industry. How about the reshaping of the workforce to deal with the future? There's been some comments, well, maybe we don't need as many uniforms as we've currently set out in policy if we've kind of got the uniforms doing the core work that we need them to do. Do you have any thoughts on the people from that perspective of reshaping the overall workforce?
So there's always the short, the mid, and the longer term posture for that. So the work to actually evaluate how many we need for each pillar, whether it's contract, public service, reserve, or reg force, is continuously ongoing. So assessing our forces to ensure that we have the right balance of individuals as part of the defense team. In the shorter term, though, as an example, we need to implement measures to make sure that we can actually accomplish our short-term objectives. So, for example, we're going to need a lot more trainers and instructors over the next couple of years to ensure that we can onboard and train more people as we onboard more recruits coming in. So we may have to have a few different means in order to do that. It may be a bit by contract, but also public service who can do that. So we constantly do that. We need to reevaluate in the short term what I need to do now and what means do I need to set forward to do that. while we are working as well the long term and the force composition and who needs to do what. So that work is consistently ongoing.
We're getting to kind of the last few minutes that we have, General, and we had Nathalie Drouin with us today, and we talked about one of the commitments that was made in our North Strong and Free was the regular update of our defense policy, so that we're not in this boom-bust cycle, and that you've got something that's more continuous, hopefully between governments in terms of fundamentally looking at the environment we're in and seeing if we're still well adapted. The other thing that was said in there, which was, I think, welcome from a lot of stakeholders who follow these issues, was the commitment to a national security strategy. And we heard today from the National Security Intelligence Advisor a little bit about, even though that's not ready for prime time yet, it's kind of a commitment to deliver it in 2025. And the question here is, well, what's the military input that's been going into the national security strategy? And maybe a two-part question, because ultimately we're heading into a period of where we can anticipate with a new prime minister going to be in a position shortly, potentially going to be going into a period where we'll head into a federal election, which inevitably is a Ret'd period. You have your period where ultimately you're going to have a transition. How do we maintain momentum from your perspective so we aren't actually, because if you're simply staying where you are, you're actually losing ground, in terms of how fast things are moving. So what kind of feedback or input do you have into the strategy, and how do we keep momentum going through a period of transition?
So we have been involved into that effort, and we did contribute. And again, this was a very collaborative process, so hugely enabling. So how do we keep momentum? It's exactly by having a plan or a strategy that actually helps keeping the momentum, as we can also measure where we are at when we have those strategies and plans all ready to go. So the national security strategy is more of a broader concept. We have ONSAF also that is very, very informative and useful for us to nest all the other work that we are doing underneath. And from a defense perspective, we have our own implementation plan nested underneath the policy, and then measuring where we are at so that we can actually report and then dial it faster, less, and so on. So how we could keep momentum is actually by having a plan and then measuring it and reporting on it so that we are clear on where we are at, but also be ready to accelerate, because we have investments coming in, and we want to make sure that we actually deliver the capabilities on an accelerated mode. So having a plan that we can, again, communicate in a logical manner helps everybody, including the central agencies, understand what we are doing, and then again enabling our work.
Well, we, of course, in this kind of audience, you have a really committed group of folks that want to kind of help the mission and the mandate of the Canadian Forces and really reinforce the narrative. And I think one of the great opportunities we have here is to bring everybody together, think a little bit about what that narrative is from all of the different sectors that we're working in. Well, General, the elevator is going down right now. So we had the elevator pitch going up, which was your key thinking about the job. Maybe just as the elevator doors are about to open, what's the last thing that maybe you'd like to share with the members of the audience here that are gathered? And we actually are being, of course, live cast with folks all around the country on CPAC as well. So what would be your final message you'd like to leave us with?
So I think the role that you can play with us is inform Canadians about their defense. So everybody needs to have a contribution and a better understanding of what defense is about. So this is the role that you can help play. There's so much information that is incorrect out there. So having people who can speak from an informed platform is always hugely enabling for us. Because I think what I would like to leave you with today is that we are just at the right time at the moment to increase and accelerate our transformation to make sure we are ready. Because if we don't do this now, it is better to have a smaller investment at the moment than having to throw 10% GDP at defense in 5 years when we're in a crisis. So this is what I would like to leave everybody with today, with the need to get on with this and not waste any more time.
General, I think that we were very fortunate to have you at the helm of the Canadian Armed Forces at this time. We know it's a team effort, and we know that you're surrounded by some great leaders. But I think you're everything that we would hope to see in our Chief of Defence Staff, professional, got all the right values, and really representing, I think, the best of Canada. So on behalf of all of the gathered folks that are here at the Ottawa Conference, I'd like to just thank you for being here, but more importantly, thank you for your service to your country. Merci.
Thank you. Merci.
Vous allez juste rester avec nous quelques minutes. Okay?